Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into the surprisingly scandalous, dark money-fueled reality of ancient Roman politics. When we think of ancient Rome, we usually picture pristine marble statues, noble philosophers in togas, and grand disciplined legions. But today, we're digging into the historical texts to uncover a political machine that ran on something far less noble. We're talking cold, hard cash and staggering levels of corruption. So let's jump right in and see how the Republic actually operated behind closed doors. We're going to shatter that marble statue illusion right out of the gate with an incredible acronym from the 4th century AD, ROMA. It stands for Radix Omnium Malorum Avaritia, which translates perfectly to greed is the root of all evil. And what's really fascinating here is that this wasn't just some cynical joke. It perfectly captured the open secret of the Roman political machine. Long before this acronym even existed, the solid structures of the Roman state were already being completely hollowed out by massive financial ambitions. Which brings us to Section 1, Greed and Ancient Rome, setting the stage. Early Roman law and order was certainly impressive, but let's be real, raw ambition required a very heavy purse. Take Julius Caesar, for example. We all know him as a brilliant general, but according to Plutarch, he quite literally raided the public treasury. When a tribune tried to use the law to stop him, Caesar essentially said, hey, arms and laws have different times, and he actually sent for smiths to force the treasury doors open. No joke. He seized 15,000 gold ingots, 30,000 silver ingots, and 30 million sesterces just to fund his own rise to power. He was dipping into tubs of cash from wealthy contractors like Crassus, basically introducing the custom of corrupting the public at a shockingly steep cost. Moving on to Section 2. The price of power, bribocrats, and dark money. Now, what's really wild about this is how closely Roman campaign finance resembles what we'd call modern political dark money. The Republic lacked a strict bureaucratic apparatus, so administrative functions were delegated. And it was just an unspoken rule that magistrates would get incredibly rich during their terms in office. To grasp the sheer scale of this corruption, just look at this staggering number, 40 million sesterces. That's the amount calculated to have been stolen straight from the Roman tax rolls by Verres, the infamous governor of Sicily in the 1st century BC. Verres is essentially the original archetype of the callous bribocrat. He looted his province with scientific, methodical determination. He gathered so much wealth that when he was finally put on trial, the bribes he offered to the jurors were practically a line item in his budget. To really put that into perspective, let's compare Verres's massive 40 million sesterces theft with the meager 900 sesterces a standard Roman soldier made in a year. You can truly see the astronomical wealth gap driven by political greed. A soldier would have to work for tens of thousands of years to earn what one corrupt politician skimmed off the top. And the wildest part, even his accuser, Cicero, admitted that Verres's conduct wasn't some crazy anomaly. It was basically the norm across much of the Roman Empire. Okay, let's look at Section 3, Foreign Gold and Plunder, the military sphere.
So this greed didn't stop at the city limits. It extended right into the military. Commanders weren't just out there winning glory. They were engaging in fully legalized, unpunished extortion. The army wasn't just a tool for defense. Exporting the Roman Empire and establishing the Pax Romana wasn't just about grand strategy. It was an incredibly profitable business enterprise. Military commanders faced absolutely zero punishment for enriching themselves with the spoils of war. In fact, it was viewed less as corruption and more as a legitimate percentage of the business at hand. This foreign gold became a massive incentive for Roman expansionism.
The historical texts reveal the sheer brazenness of the whole thing. Take the Numidian king Jugurtha. When Rome was deciding who to support in a foreign dispute, Jugurtha didn't bother with delicate diplomacy. He simply sent ambassadors laden with silver and gold to glut the Senate with gifts. He completely bought their loyalty. Or consider the incredible story of Lucius Scipio Asiaticus. He was accused of taking a 6,000-pound gold bribe for a favorable peace treaty. In response, his brother literally tore up the account books right in front of the Senate. He was furious that they would even dare ask for an audit after all the money they had brought into the treasury. Basically, accountability was practically non-existent if you were powerful enough. That brings us to Section 4, the hypocritical moralists. Do as I say, not as I do. The deep irony here is that the very men who wrote the history books condemning this behavior, they were often the biggest offenders. We rely on ancient historians and philosophers for our moral understanding of Rome, but their private lives were often deeply entangled in the exact same corruption they preached against. Take the historian Sallust. In his virtuous writings, he harshly judged the elite, condemning the leaders in power for profaning public life and violently seizing wealth. But his own deeds tell a totally different story. He exploited his own wealthy province to the last drop with heavy taxation and bribery, scandalizing even his jaded contemporaries. He was actually so corrupt, he had to beg Julius Caesar for protection just to get acquitted in court. In his own surviving texts from the Historia, Sallust laments how the spoils of war were seized by a chosen few, while the parents and babes of the soldiers were driven from their homes by powerful neighbors. I mean, it is beautifully written, tragic stuff. Yet, in reality, Sallust took the massive wealth he extorted from his province and used it to plant splendid gardens around his Roman estate and build a magnificent villa for Caesar. The hypocrisy is just staggering. And this leads perfectly to a famous observation by Seneca. Vice that is powerless is called virtue. Seneca was a celebrated Stoic philosopher who constantly moralized about the soul and the dangers of greed. Yet he was the intellectual in service to power par excellence. He actively enriched himself through political corruption and conspiracies, all while paying lip service to the plebs. He wrote that all men hide their sins and enjoy the results while concealing the sins themselves. Knowing his background, he certainly seemed to be speaking from personal experience. Finally, let's bring it down to the everyday democratic process in Section 5, buying the Roman vote, the campaign trail. If you wanted to reach the heights of power to engage in all this lucrative corruption, well, you first had to win an election. And according to the poet Horace, the accepted campaign playbook was highly transactional. You had to go out and shake hands, using quick-witted prompters to whisper the names of the voters so you appeared to know everyone personally. You would hire a massive paid entourage of supporters to follow you around just to make you look important. And perhaps most crucially, you had to throw extravagant, lavish campaign banquets to literally purchase the goodwill of the electorate. Even the legendary orator Cicero fiercely defended this system. He brilliantly spun the actions of a consul named Murena, who was accused of paying his electoral entourage. Cicero argued that paying the lower classes for their support was simply allowing them to exercise their dutiful feelings. He claimed that since the poor couldn't invite politicians to their houses or go bail for them, accepting money and attending campaigns was their only way to participate and show support. He somehow made blatant bribery sound like a noble civic duty. And this wasn't just some accident. It was a deeply studied, calculated strategy. Quintus Cicero, in his handbook on canvassing for the consulship, explicitly instructed his brother Marcus on this very topic. He wrote that liberality must be displayed in banquets, funded by private property, and you must make sure to attend them yourself and get your friends to go. Buying votes with massive feasts was a foundational, completely normalized campaign strategy. When challenged on this open bribery, Cicero actually went on the offensive. He openly mocked the strict moralist Cato, who argued that men's judgments shouldn't be corrupted by pleasures in food. Cicero basically laughed it off, asking if Cato really expected politicians to win the helm of the Republic without soothing men's minds and tendering luxuries. He argued that setting apart times for pleasure and wining and dining voters were literally the things that kept the Roman constitution intact. To them, the system didn't work in spite of the money. It worked because of the money. Seeing how structured and deeply ingrained this ancient playbook of power was, it really poses a fascinating question. Has the nature of political power and dark money actually changed all that much over the last 2 millennia? We look back at these ancient texts and we see campaign finance scandals, war profiteering, hypocrisy among the elite, and the outright purchasing of influence. It makes you wonder just how much human nature has truly evolved since the days of the Republic. I'll leave you with this chilling, absolute mic drop realization from the foreign king Jugurtha. After successfully bribing the Roman Senate and escaping justice, he turned back to look at Rome as he fled and said, "A city for sale and ripe for ruin, if once she can find a purchaser." It is a stark reminder that when an entire political system is built on greed and dark money, absolutely everything, even a global empire, has a price. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this provided a totally new lens through which to view ancient history.